I raised my daughter, Emma, as a single mother. But 2 years ago, I lost her in a tragic accident. The cause was drowning. It happened during her honeymoon, when she fell off a cruiser into the sea. Her husband, Harold, explained it as an accident, saying she had accidentally fallen overboard. Susan, the funeral and cremation have already been done. He said the body was in such a state from the drowning that they had to take care of it immediately after returning home. Why? Why did you do everything without even consulting me? I couldn't even be there for my precious daughter's final moments, and all I wanted was to say my goodbye at her grave. I just wanted to wish her happiness in heaven. Since then, I've been living in a fog of sadness, unable to shake off the darkness. But one day, something arrived in the mail that left me trembling. Something impossible arrived in the mail. It was a DVD. The sender's name was none other than my deceased daughter, Emma. I was so shaken that I couldn't even manage to set the DVD in the player properly. Come on! Finally, when I got the DVD to play, tears flooded my eyes. It wasn't just because I saw my beloved Emma on the screen. She was speaking directly to me, clear as day. Mom, I'm sorry. The truth is, by the time the DVD finished, I was burning with rage. I vowed to make that devil of a man pay for what he did. I made up my mind. I am Susan, a woman in her 50s, working in an office. I lost my husband when I was still young. But I managed to survive the pain because of my only daughter, Emma. Unlike me, Emma was beautiful and grew up kind-hearted despite our financial struggles. That was my greatest joy and my pride. But one thing always worried me: she was at an age where she should have had a boyfriend, but she didn't. I wondered if she was holding back for my sake, and it weighed on my heart. Then one day, Emma came to me with a bright smile on her face. Mom, what is it? Hey, actually, I'm planning to get married. What? I was completely taken aback. I had never imagined she would talk about marriage, especially since I thought she didn't even have a boyfriend. With tears of joy welling up in my eyes, Emma told me about her fiancé. His name was Harold, a young entrepreneur in his 30s. They met when he visited her company for business, and they grew close from there. He didn't judge us for being a single-parent family. In fact, he even praised me. Hearing that, I couldn't help but embrace Emma tightly. Emma, I'm so happy for you. It's all thanks to you, Mom. You raised me with so much love. Thank you. As I hugged Emma, tears brimming in her eyes, and a gentle smile on her face, I believed it with all my heart. I believed Emma was going to find happiness from now on. But that belief would be shattered in the worst possible way, in the most devastating way imaginable. Emma, I cried out, collapsing in tears, unable to do anything. Emma had died. My precious daughter, my pride, the one I loved more than anything, was gone. The cause was drowning. During their honeymoon abroad, she fell from a cruiser in an accident and never made it back. Harold explained that she accidentally fell overboard while they were on the cruiser. It happened in a brief moment when he had looked away, and by the time he noticed, it was already too late. Susan, the funeral and cremation have already been completed. He explained that her body was in such a terrible state from the drowning that they had to proceed immediately upon their return. Why did you do everything without consulting me? At the very least, I wanted to visit her grave. I just wanted to say my final goodbye to Emma at her grave. I wanted to wish her happiness in heaven. I believed Harold would want the same. But even that simple wish was not granted. I'm sorry, but I have a lot going on. I understand. But please, just tell me where her grave is. I just don't have time for this. Goodbye. After that, I lost contact with Harold. His attitude was nothing like the caring person Emma had described. It was cold and merciless. I was shocked, and at the same time, I felt a deep anger. But I couldn't bring myself to stay angry any longer. The despair of losing Emma was just too overwhelming. 2 years have passed since then. Yet, I am still drowning in the darkness of despair. Throughout this time, it has been Emma's friend, Chloe, who has supported me. Despite her busy schedule as a freelance writer, she always made time to visit me. Her bright, composed presence helped me keep my spirits up. Today, I brought your favorite brownies, Susan. Let's eat them together. Thank you, Chloe. Chloe's kindness touched my heart deeply. It's no problem. I can't always come, but you've always been there for me, so it's the least I can do. You've been close friends with Emma since you were little. As I looked at Chloe, memories came flooding back. I remembered the scenes of Chloe and Emma playing together when they were little. Emma, who was a little shy, was often led by Chloe, who was more energetic and took her on adventures. Even as they got older and started school, their friendship only grew stronger. As I recalled these memories, Chloe stared off into the distance with the same nostalgic look. Yes, Emma has been my best friend since I was little. And even now, she lives in my heart. Chloe, you. Hearing her heartfelt words made tears pour from my eyes. Susan, I'm sorry, I couldn't stop crying in front of Chloe. Even after 2 years, there isn't a single day where I don't think of Emma. And when I hear words like that, the tears just won't stop. If only I could visit her grave. If only I could. I still haven't been able to do it. The truth is, I still haven't been able to visit Emma's grave since then. I've lost all contact with Harold, and I don't even know where it is. I asked Chloe to help me find the grave, but no matter what she did, she couldn't find it. Chloe even went to Harold's company once. She told me about what happened there. I have never forgotten what she told me. Harold used his strong-armed subordinates to throw her out of the building. Hey, lady, if you keep talking nonsense, we'll sue you for trespassing. That's what they said to her. I remembered every detail of what Chloe told me, and it made my chest ache. When Emma got engaged, why didn't I investigate Harold more thoroughly? I can't stop regretting my decisions. If I had known he was such a cold person, I would never have let him have Emma. Emma, who meant more to me than my own life. Chloe looked at me with sadness, but her eyes held a strong resolve. Susan, why don't we go together? Where to? To the last place Emma visited. The last place. I stared at Chloe, eyes wide with surprise. I had never thought of that before. Or rather, I was too consumed by my grief to even consider it. So when Chloe suggested it, it felt like time, which had stopped for me, was moving again. But I refused. I was too scared. I felt that if I went there, I might feel Emma's spirit close to me. But at the same time, I would be confirming that she was truly gone. I'm sorry, I can't go. I understand. I'll go alone then. Chloe didn't press any further. I'm sure she understood how I felt, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. So when Chloe returned a week later, I asked her hesitantly, Chloe, how was it? I asked nervously, thinking Chloe might have been heartbroken, but she didn't look that way at all. Chloe looked at me with a serious expression. Her eyes weren't nostalgic. They held something hidden within. Susan, please wait just a little longer. Chloe's words were filled with meaning, but I couldn't understand what she meant. When I asked for clarification, Chloe didn't provide any answers at that moment. After that, I continued to live in a state of unease. But then 1 month later, something arrived that made me shiver. Something impossible arrived in the mail. It was a DVD. The sender was none other than my deceased daughter, Emma. With trembling hands, I touched the package and tore it open forcefully. I struggled to insert the DVD into the player. I was so shaken that I couldn't set it properly. Come on! When I finally got the DVD to play, tears started flooding from my eyes. It wasn't just because my beloved Emma was on the screen. Emma, in the video, spoke clearly. "Mom, I'm sorry for worrying you, but I'm alive." As I finished watching the entire recording, I felt like I had become a monster. Deep inside, I realized how much anger a person can harbor. If Harold were here, I didn't trust myself to hold back. I had learned the truth about who Harold really was. People say that extreme anger can bring a sense of calm, and I felt that deeply. Although I usually hate conflict, I had no intention of forgiving Harold. I immediately called Chloe. "Chloe, I've learned everything from Emma." When I said this quietly, Chloe gave a sly smile on the other end of the line. Even without seeing her face, I could sense her smile. Confirming this, Chloe spoke calmly yet firmly. "Susan, we're ready. We're ready to send Harold to hell." With that, I met up with Chloe, prepared everything, and headed to Harold's office. I was determined to bring justice for Emma and make Harold pay. It's been 2 years since I last came here. Looking up at the building of Harold's company, it felt like the fortress of a tyrant. And perhaps that wasn't far from the truth. I waited at the entrance. Soon enough, he arrived. Harold arrived in his luxury car. From inside the vehicle, he looked at me as if he was staring at something filthy. "DCH, coming all the way here. Such an annoying old hag." He glanced at me with a look of disgust and signaled to his subordinates. "Hey, you guys, get rid of that eyesore of an old hag. Trash belongs in the trash can. Hurry up." At Harold's vile command, strong men dressed in black suits approached me. They were likely the same men who had thrown Chloe out before. With the force used to capture a criminal, they pinned me to the ground. But this was all part of the plan. As they held me down, I took out my smartphone and pressed the play button. I made sure the sound echoed loudly around. It was the audio from the message video on the DVD. "Mom, I'm sorry for worrying you, but I'm alive." Emma's voice echoed around, and passers-by looked puzzled. Harold rushed over to me, a furious expression on his face. "What the hell are you doing, you fucking old hag?" Despite the crowd, Harold snatched my smartphone from me and smashed it to the ground. He stomped on the screen repeatedly, the sound of glass cracking filling the air. Though I was upset about my phone, I smiled inwardly as I was pinned down. "Harold, we recorded everything that just happened. Yes, everything was going according to plan." Of course, deep down, I had hoped for an apology without having to go this far. But just as Chloe had predicted, Harold didn't apologize. Instead, he stomped on my smartphone, destroying it. He wanted to eliminate anything that could be used against him. To me, this wasn't just about smashing a smartphone. It was equivalent to trampling on the memory of my beloved Emma. Understanding how I felt, Chloe held up her own smartphone, which had recorded everything that just happened, and pointed it at Harold. "If you refuse to negotiate, I'll take this to the police. You whore, hand that over." Harold lunged for her phone, but Chloe easily dodged him. "This bitch. You think a woman like you can threaten me?" Harold gritted his teeth and glared, but Chloe remained undaunted. "Threaten? I don't know what you mean. If you believe you've done nothing wrong, why not act confidently? Shut up, hand it over, you trash." Harold reached for her phone again, but Chloe skillfully evaded him. "Oh, I could give it to you, but it would be useless. It's already auto-saved to the cloud." Even though I knew this was part of the plan, I held my breath as I watched the two of them. Harold trembled with rage, while Chloe faced him with a composed and steady gaze. I've always been a timid person, so even knowing it was all a strategy, I felt anxious and tense. Then Harold let out a deep sigh and signaled to his subordinates, "You all stay here. I'll take care of these trash myself." Harold led us to a quiet cafe, leaving his subordinates behind. As we walked to the cafe, I steeled myself. This was a battle I couldn't afford to lose. I realized I couldn't rely on Chloe alone. Harold, sensing my hostility, glared at Chloe and me the moment we sat down at the cafe. But I wasn't afraid anymore. Sitting beside Chloe, I stared back at Harold, meeting his gaze head on. "Harold, it's been 2 years since we last spoke like this. What did you really think about Emma?" "Ha?" I asked through tears of anger and frustration, but Harold simply glared, remaining silent. He was probably trying to figure out how much we knew. His attitude, even in this situation, only fueled my irritation. Sensing my feelings, Chloe began speaking, glaring back fiercely. "Fine. If you're not going to answer, then I'll tell the truth right here. I'll expose all the terrible things you've done." 2 years ago, during their honeymoon in Cancun, Mexico, Harold bought a small villa there and decided to use it as his base of operations. Additionally, he worked in the U.S. during the weekdays and returned to the villa in Cancun, where Emma lived, on weekends, a so-called commuter marriage. That was the lifestyle they were living. At this point in the conversation, Harold, while glaring at us, still had a smug look on his face as he mocked me and Chloe. "Worthless broad, you're better suited to being a stalker than a freelance writer. How unfortunate. I've been stalked before, but I've never been the one doing the stalking." "Then this must be your first time. In that case, out of pity for your persistence, I might consider making you my side piece. A woman like you suits that role. Thanks, but no thanks. Besides, you don't need another one, do you? You already have someone." "What?" At those words, Harold's expression changed, and at that moment, I leaned forward and spoke. "Harold, you deceived Emma while you were secretly seeing someone else, the daughter of a CEO from a major company. How did you?" Harold's expression changed instantly. His eyes widened in shock, staring at me as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Of course, I wasn't going to miss this opportunity. Still fueled by anger, I continued confronting Harold. I told him how he had made Emma believe their marriage was going well, all while secretly dating the daughter of a major company's CEO with the intention of marrying her. And most of all, it wasn't even for love, it was purely for money. "Harold, you plan to marry that CEO's daughter for your company and secure a massive investment from her father. This old hag. Where's your proof? That woman must have filled your head with lies." Harold pointed at Chloe as he spoke, continuing his tirade. "So that's your game. You two plan to blackmail me and split the money. Pathetic, a greedy old hag and a worthless broad." Heh. As his vile laughter filled the air, I exchanged a nod with Chloe before slamming a document down on the table in front of Harold. "Your life insurance policy on Emma. This is the proof." How did you get this?" As Harold's face turned pale in shock, Chloe gave him a sly grin. "Don't underestimate the power of a freelance writer. Oh, this bitch." Harold trembled with rage, glaring at Chloe and me, but his anger was entirely misplaced. I felt no sympathy and no guilt. Of course, Chloe felt the same way. Harold was the one doing something despicable and cruel. It was clear he planned to get rid of Emma before marrying the CEO's daughter to collect the insurance payout. But that wasn't the only thing I couldn't forgive. Harold, you used Emma's heart for your selfish, disgusting desires. Harold had lied to Emma to keep her from meeting me. He told her the vile lie that I was suffering from a severe mental illness and that seeing me would only cause confusion. It was a devilish tactic, exploiting Emma's kindness. Emma, who had been manipulated by Harold, felt like her heart was breaking, but she endured it, even though she couldn't meet me and felt pain. She did it to protect her beloved mother. When Chloe told me this truth, it felt like my chest was being crushed. I wondered just how much pain Emma must have endured. It was fortunate that she had Chloe to meet with, otherwise, Emma would have suffered alone. I will never forgive you, Harold. You exploited Emma's kindness, tormented her, and even tried to kill her. Shut up, you fucking old hag. Harold's face twisted further in anger, but then he leaned back on the sofa, looked up at the ceiling, and sighed lazily. Oh, great. Just great. So I missed out on the insurance money, huh? His words and an apologetic attitude made me want to raise my hand, but Chloe stopped me. Then Harold, mocking us, continued speaking. Well, if you want to know, Emma was the side piece. The CEO's daughter was only for money. Emma's face and body were far better. Mwahaha. Hearing this, I clenched my hands tightly on my lap, struggling to suppress my rising anger. Harold smirked. But well, it was tough when I was with her. I had to hold back my laughter the whole time. He posed as if hugging himself mockingly. When she said she loved me, unaware of my real intentions, I almost burst out laughing. I don't need love. All I want is pleasure and money. Harold's vile confession didn't stop there. Even though I was planning to get rid of her, she still said she loved me. There's no limit to how stupid people can be. Mwahaha. Hehehe. Ah ha 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 ha. As I felt murderous intent rising within me yet again, I heard a tearful voice from behind. Why? Why did I fall for someone like this? The moment I heard that voice, I turned around sharply. Emma. You, Mom. After 2 long years. No, not just time, but all the sadness we had endured, I was finally reunited with my beloved daughter. It felt like my heart was going to burst, and all I could do was stare at her. I knew Emma felt the same way, but I understood. Emma had suffered far more than I did. I am her mother, and just by looking at her face, I could tell. Even after Chloe revealed the truth about Harold, some part of Emma still held on to a sliver of hope for him. But we both knew this was not the time to embrace or cry. It was time to put an end to this. We needed to put an end to the cursed time created by this man. I looked at Emma, nodded silently, and then faced Harold head on. Emma did the same. Well, looks like it's game over, Harold said with an expression that made it seem like he had simply lost a game. With no remorse whatsoever, he spoke with a sarcastic smile. Oh well, I missed out on the insurance money, but whatever. As long as I marry that CEO's daughter, I'll have all the money I need. Emma stared down at Harold from above. There was no trace of the regret or sadness that had been in her expression earlier. Emma had already made up her mind. Do you really think anyone would marry you? No one marries someone just to be killed. Though Emma's words were filled with anger and resentment, Harold seemed unfazed. Mwahaha. That's the problem with pretty faces and good bodies. They're so dumb. Harold sneered. Think about it. No one's dead. So all you have is circumstantial evidence about the insurance. Emma, old hag, worthless broad, you 3 are on a different level. Harold grinned, pointing at his head while looking at us. Even though we had cornered him this much, it seemed like nothing could be done. But that wasn't the case. All 3 of us, Emma, Chloe, And I knew it. This was the moment when everything was truly resolved. Emma spoke to Harold with confidence. Proof? I don't need any. Humph. Is that just bravado? Or what? Are you going to resort to violence? If you do that, you'll never get married. Mwahaha. As Harold laughed victoriously, his body shaking with laughter, I exchanged glances with Emma and Chloe, nodding in agreement. And then, she looked Harold straight in the eye. Harold, what do you want? Old hag, I never had any business with you. You're just in the way. Get lost. That's true, but I think you might have some business with this person. What? The moment Harold's expression changed in shock, I thrust my smartphone in front of him. Harold's face turned pale. Impossible. What is this? It was no wonder Harold was panicking. The smartphone I was holding was currently on a live stream. The person on the other end was the CEO's daughter that Harold had been dating for money. Through my smartphone, she had heard every word of our conversation. She looked down at Harold with the cold eyes of a queen delivering judgment. Harold, or should I say scumbag, you were only after my money, weren't you? No, that's not true. I love you. Ha, how pathetic. I'll be sure to let my father know about this. As she sighed and said this, Harold drew closer to my smartphone, clinging to it desperately. Sweat poured down his pale face. If her father, the CEO, found out about this, the engagement would definitely be called off. There would be no chance of financial support for Harold. That was the most devastating outcome. No, please. I beg you. You said you loved me, didn't you? If you really love me, please. The CEO's daughter looked down at the pleading Harold for a few moments before coldly dismissing him. Truly pathetic. I didn't think you were such a fool with no memory. What do you mean? You said it yourself. You don't need love. She smiled coldly as Harold clutched his head, looking like he was about to cry. Goodbye. A dumbass like you, with no love and no brain. With those words, the live stream ended, and the screen went dark. It was as if it was foreshadowing Harold's future. Harold remained on his knees, clutching his head, his face filled with despair. Moo! His loud cry echoed through the nearly empty cafe. After witnessing this, I turned back to Emma. Tears welled up in my eyes. Emma's eyes were also filled with tears. Emma and I embraced each other tightly, crying together. The love and warmth that poured from Emma's trembling body reached me deeply. I was holding onto the warmth of Emma, whom I thought I would never be able to hold again. I was embracing all of her now. Emma, thank you for staying alive. I'm so happy to see you again, Mom. As I held her tighter, I made a vow. I would protect her no matter what. At my feet, Harold remained on his knees, his face filled with despair, staring wide-eyed. Fuck, Fuyuk. Why does everyone keep getting in my way? I looked down at Harold quietly. Harold, no one is getting in your way. Shut up. If you hadn't interfered, everything would have gone perfectly. But you. Harold gritted his teeth, glaring at me, but I remained calm. No, you were blinded by greed and money, and you simply chose not to accept Emma's love. Harold could no longer say anything, and collapsed on the spot. I never saw Harold again after that, but he was never charged with any crime for this incident. Both Emma and I were grateful just to be safe, so we didn't pursue legal action. However, Harold ended up ruining himself in another way. Unfazed, he later attempted an investment scam on social media and was arrested. While it was a bit pitiful, I felt no sympathy. Meanwhile, Emma has been slowly healing her emotional wounds and is now focusing on her job search. Mom, I'm off. Okay, good luck. Seeing the slight worry on my face, Emma smiled brightly. I know. And when I find someone good, I'll make sure you meet them, Mom." Her smile made me smile back softly as I waved. I truly wish for Emma's happiness.
"I need you to leave." "Fine, I'll leave the house." Polly, my stepdaughter, without looking at me, her eyes fixed on her mobile phone as she speaks. "Make sure you clean up your room." Rachel, the woman my husband had an affair with, gives me a triumphant glance. "You need to leave by tomorrow. And make sure to take all your belongings with you." First thing I did was to call the junk removal service, arranging for their arrival the next morning. "You said everything, right? I'll make sure it's all taken care of," I whispered, smirking to myself. "My name is Olivia. I'm a graphic designer who once worked at a major advertising agency but now run my own studio, accepting freelance work. My husband Vince is 5 years my junior, a businessman working in new product development for a large candy manufacturer. Although we had gone out a few times for meals through work while I was at the agency, I never felt a clear romantic interest, partly because Vince was younger. However, how Vince asked me out moved me, and we began dating when I was 31. Vince and I found joy in our shared hobbies and laughed at the same things, making our relationship fulfilling. Our mutual love for walks helped bring our hearts even closer. Our healthy relationship lasted for 2 years, and then Vince proposed to me. I was truly shocked at the time. I was 33 and unsure if I was really the right choice for him. After he proposed, I found out Vince had a child. I was shocked. Why hadn't he told me sooner? It wasn't something that could be hidden forever, and I started to wonder if Vince was dishonest. These thoughts crossed my mind. Vince tearfully explained he thought I wouldn't accept the marriage if I knew about the child. "I love you so much, I just have to marry you." I cried too, but honestly, I felt Vince was being unfair. Because I loved Vince, I struggled with the decision but ultimately accepted the marriage proposal. Vince's parents, Wally and Shannon, didn't care about my age at all, they were just happy about the marriage based on my character. After getting married, we decided to live together at my home office. I didn't want to change the office address, and it was spacious enough. Above all, it was my favorite place. Vince was kind to me, and our marriage was happy except for one thing. That was how cold Vince's stepdaughter, Polly, was towards me. She hardly warmed up to me at all. Vince didn't worry about it. "Eventually, we'll get along. If we have a brother or sister for her, things might change." But there were no signs of pregnancy for me. 7 years into our marriage, when I turned 40, I stopped preconception care. By then, Vince and I had given up on having children. "Don't worry about it." Vince would say so, but he seemed to regret it quite a bit. He loved kids and he would often say so over drinks. "I had imagined having 1 girl and 2 boys. I'd love a boy next to play catch with." I'd love a boy next to play catch with. Polly seemed to dislike discussions about children, and whenever Vince would start talking about having another child, she'd retreat to her room. Even without this, Polly and I hardly ever spoke. And this only made our relationship colder. When we told Wally and Shannon, they said, "It can't be helped." But they were probably disappointed. They lived in the countryside, and Vince was the eldest son of the main family. Without a boy, there would be no one to carry on the family line, since Polly is a girl. After stopping preconception care, Vince's behavior towards me gradually became more distant. He would often respond to my questions with non-committal answers and spent more time on his mobile phone. Even when I gently pointed it out, he'd dismiss it, saying he was busy with work. Vince's company was a good one, with almost no overtime or work on weekends. We used to have dinner together and often went out on weekends. But recently, Vince started working late more often, saying he had to do overtime. He even began working on weekends, something that was rare before. Recently, he went on a business trip for the first time since we got married. Even though we didn't have children, I wanted to remain close to Vince, almost like lovers, forever. But somehow, Vince seemed to be distancing himself from me. And as usual, Polly was still not warming up to me. She always played with her mobile phone, even when we were together in the living room. When Vince and I were in a somewhat strained relationship, Vince suddenly went back to his parents' house. Worried about what might have happened, I was restless waiting for Vince's return when an email from him arrived. The message read, "Dad has become a guarantor for a debt and had to take it on himself." Thinking this was a serious situation, I wondered if there was any way I could help. Running my own office, I had more disposable income than a typical housewife. I also had some savings Vince didn't know about. As I was considering using it, another email from Vince arrived. Dad had set me as the guarantor, it read, my eyes widening in shock as I stared at my mobile phone. No matter how many times I looked, the content of the message didn't change. As I was going over the email again, Vince called me. "Dad has done something terrible, just like I wrote in the email." All I could manage to say was, "Yeah," in a weak voice. Vince continued, his voice filled with desperation. "There's a debt of over $100,000. I was stunned. It was far beyond what I could handle. "Our family can't just pay that off easily. But if we don't, it'll cause trouble not only for us, but to you and your parents." No matter how much I tried to speak, it felt like no air was reaching my lungs. It felt as if the air around me had thinned. I could only open and close my mouth like a fish, unable to produce any sound. "We have no choice but to fake a divorce. We'll have to live apart for a while." I couldn't understand why Vince was bringing up divorce at this time. I wanted to argue back, but I couldn't find my voice. It felt like I was suffocating, unable to think clearly. "If we don't pretend to be divorced, the debt collectors will go after you and your parents too." Could that really be true? But at that moment, I couldn't think of anything. Vince came home and tried to explain the debt to me, but honestly, I couldn't grasp it. I was too panicked to think. Polly had heard about the debt too, but she didn't seem too worried. At that time, I thought maybe Polly didn't fully understand the situation. "We'll sort out the debt somehow. I'm going to leave the house to fake our divorce. Please bear with it for a little while." I believed Vince's words about getting remarried, clinging to them as my only hope. And so, after 8 years of marriage, when I was 41, Vince and I separated under the guise of a divorce. Polly, of course, chose to leave with Vince, leaving me alone again. Vince left the house. Since I used this place for my personal office, it would have been difficult for me to leave. I thought Vince and Polly would come back soon, but they never did. Shortly after, to my shock, Vince and Polly started living with another woman. When Vince told me this, I had to clutch my chest, fearing my heart might stop. Vince tried to explain everything over email. But I wanted to talk in person, so I convinced him to meet at a diner. Knowing it was a difficult conversation, I still dressed up and meticulously applied my makeup, oddly looking forward to seeing Vince again after so long. However, Vince showed up in a sweater and worn-out pants, as if he had come in his loungewear. Even though we hadn't seen each other in a while. He didn't seem happy to see me and got straight to the point without much of a greeting. I was already feeling quite down by this point. "About her, her name is Rachel. Polly's taken a liking to her." He began and I barely processed what Vince was saying. Everything sounded like excuses to me. I couldn't believe that Polly, always so distant, would warm up to anyone. "Rachel has been through a divorce. She was escaping domestic violence from her husband, which is why she turned to me for help." I wondered why Vince had to go to such lengths and couldn't understand it. Was Vince really that much of a pushover? Vince promised that once the debt issue at home and Rachel's domestic violence issue were resolved, we would live together again. All I could do was nod. Too much had happened, and I was unable to think deeply about anything. Today, fearing I wouldn't understand Vince's words, I recorded our entire conversation on my mobile phone. I planned to listen to it again once I had calmed down. There was no sign of Vince breaking up with Rachel. On the contrary, they seemed to be getting closer. Vince and Rachel were posting happy pictures together on social media almost daily. I knew I shouldn't look, but I couldn't help searching for them. Every posted photo was a new torment for me. I've confronted Vince several times, complaining about it, but Vince would reply, "I have to post those photos so the abusive ex-husband gives up." Whenever I asked when he would break up with Rachel or about the debt, Vince always dodged the question, leaving me without a clear answer. Before I knew it, a year had passed. By this point, I started to have my doubts. I decided to contact Vince's family. Despite Vince's warning that contacting them could lead the debt collectors to me, ruining all our efforts, I couldn't just stand by. "Hello, Wally. It's been a while." Wally answered cheerfully. "It's been a while, indeed. Are you over your illness?" Illness? What was he talking about? Neither Vince nor I had been sick. Wally continued. "I heard you were hospitalized with an infectious disease. Vince told us even calling you would be too strenuous." I managed to deflect and kept the conversation going. "Oh, I see. I've gotten much better, thank you." I began to understand what Vince was plotting. The debt issue with his family was probably a lie. This also explained why Polly wasn't surprised when she heard about the debt. Vince must have told her everything, keeping me and his family apart with lies. "I just got a new car. Maybe I can drive over to visit." Exactly as I thought, someone struggling with debt wouldn't be able to afford a new car. "Really? Please do come visit. We're looking forward to it," I replied, managing to end the call without revealing my shock. I was so stunned by the revelation that I collapsed onto the floor. I was unable to focus on work for a while after uncovering this truth. Everything Vince had told me was a lie. He must have started his affair with Rachel around the time we gave up on having children. His distant behavior, the constant presence of his mobile phone, the sudden increase in overtime, weekend work, and business trips were all lies to meet Rachel. Thinking about it brought uncontrollable tears. I had endured, thinking we would be together again, that it was just a matter of patience. I had trusted Vince. It was all nonsense. I had been manipulated by Vince. As my tears dried, I imagined Vince's mocking laugh looking down on me. I couldn't forgive him. I vowed to get my revenge on Vince. The first step was to gather evidence. I decided to file for divorce. Though alimony was a consideration, I primarily wanted to sever all ties with Vince. As soon as I signed the divorce papers and sent them to Vince, he submitted them to City Hall immediately. The divorce was finalized without much ado. I was taken aback, feeling somewhat deflated. Then one day, Vince suddenly showed up. By this time, any love I had for Vince was long gone, replaced only by distrust and a desire for revenge. With caution, I opened the door to find Vince, Rachel, and Polly, all with large bags in tow. Then Vince announced, "We've decided to live here." "What do you mean by that?" I was confused, not understanding what was happening. "Just let us in for now." "Hello there." Following Vince, Rachel and Polly entered the room without any hesitation. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but something felt off. I hurried after them into the living room. The three of them were seated around the living room table. That's when I realized what was causing my unease. Rachel and Polly were smiling at each other. It struck me as odd to see Polly looking so happy. It felt like the first time I had ever seen her smile. I stood in front of Vince, crossed my arms, and looked down at him. Vince looked up and explained, "Even though we're divorced, this place is still my home too. That's why we decided to live here." Indeed, the location was convenient, close to the highway and malls. But his entitlement was astounding. To leave on his own, bring back a woman, and then try to push me out. I thought Vince must be a devil to do such a thing so nonchalantly. "I want you to leave." What should I do? After a moment of thought, I decided to go along with Vince's scheme. "Fine, I'll leave the house." Only Rachel's mouth moved. She smirked. Standing up, Rachel headed towards the kitchen, muttering something as she opened the refrigerator. The freezer's on the opposite side in this fridge. I got it wrong, she noted, taking out a bottle of mineral water and starting to drink it without asking. Polly, without looking at me and focused on her mobile phone. Make sure you clean up your room. Rachel gave me a triumphant look. Be out by tomorrow, I responded with a smile. Sure. Rachel, without giving me another look, piled on. And make sure to take all your stuff with you. Got it, I replied cheerfully, to which Rachel shot me a look of contempt. Once the conversation was over, Vince and his company stood up to leave. We don't want to get in the way of your packing, so we'll head out. Good luck with the cleanup, Rachel and Vince said smugly as they left the house. I laid out the report from the detective agency on the table. It included photos of Rachel working at a night bar and Vince drinking happily with her. I decided to use this evidence effectively and put it back into the envelope. I began to clean up the house. First, I called a junk removal service and arranged for them to come the next morning. Everything, you said. I'll make sure everything is taken care of, I muttered with a smirk. I took another look around the room. The TV, washing machine, air conditioner, refrigerator, and microwave were all purchased after getting married, but they were being used for my office. It wouldn't be a problem for me to dispose of them. Wondering what to do with the contents of the fridge, I opened the door to check the food inside. Then, I noticed an unfamiliar food container in the back of the freezer. Curious, I opened it to find an envelope inside a cooling bag. And from it, a bundle of cash emerged. The envelope was printed with a law firm's name and addressed to Rachel. Rachel's act of taking out mineral water from the fridge must have been a camouflage. Her real goal was to hide the food container in the freezer. Was this money from the alimony Rachel received when she divorced? An idea struck me. The next morning, the junk removal service arrived. I asked them to take out all the household appliances and furniture. I also requested them to dispose of the contents of the fridge and proceeded with the work. Everything went smoothly, and by noon, it was all finished. With the house emptied, I felt a sense of relief as I looked around. Imagining the frustration of those three made me unable to stop laughing. Thus, I disposed of all the furniture and appliances, left the house, and headed to the Holiday Inn downtown. In the evening, Vince called. What the hell is going on? The house is empty, he shouted so loudly that I had to move the phone away from my ear. What are you talking about? I played dumb. I mean, there's nothing inside the house. Well, I threw it all away, I responded. Threw it away? Vince sounded incredulous and continued to rant. Those were things we bought together. Why did you dispose of them without permission? Well, we're not married anymore, right? And that place is also my office, so they were my things, I retorted. Into that, Vince fell silent. Then Rachel's voice cut in. Where did you dispose of it? Tell me the location. She sounded desperate, almost hysterical. No wonder, considering the money she had carefully hidden was thrown away. As soon as I mentioned the name of the junk removal service, the call was cut off. You better hurry, everything will be gone, I muttered spitefully. While enjoying a solo dinner at a nearby restaurant, my phone rang on my way back to the hotel. It was an unknown number, but I answered anyway. To my surprise, it was the police. Apparently, there was a small fire at the junk removal service, and Vince, Rachel, and Polly were there. Moreover, Rachel was identified as the cause of the fire. Not knowing what was going on, I headed to the junk removal service. Upon arrival, the scene was chaotic. Spectators surrounded the area, and police cars, fire trucks, and ambulances were parked around. I gave my name to the police at the cordon and was allowed inside. Once inside the office, I saw Vince and the others looking diminished, surrounded by police. According to the police, upon entering the office, they started shouting, "Give back the money," and demanded to check the fridge. When an employee reluctantly opened the fridge to show it was empty, Rachel grabbed the employee by the shirt, demanding, "What did you do with the contents?" Unable to bear it, the employee pointed to the outside garbage area, where Rachel ran off to rummage through the trash. After tearing open garbage bags and not finding what she was looking for, Rachel lit a cigarette, smoked it, and carelessly threw the still-lit cigarette into the garbage area. That cigarette caused the garbage to catch fire, leading to the incident. Fortunately, the fire was quickly extinguished without any injuries, but the office's exterior wall was scorched. The police were about to conclude that there was no food container and that Rachel had just come to make false claims. That's when I informed the police that there indeed was a food container in the fridge. The food container was in the freezer, and I had taken it out myself. Rachel must have been looking for it without knowing. I had hoped Vince and Rachel would get dirty rummaging through the trash of the junk removal place. I apologized to the police honestly. The police said I wasn't to blame. They stated that since these three had caused a commotion and set the fire, the responsibility was theirs, and took Vince, Rachel, and Polly away. The specific charges weren't explained, but I was told to inquire at the police station for details. The next day, the police called me in. It turned out Vince, Rachel, and Polly had no fixed address. They had rolled into my place and stayed for a week, without changing their address. Without an address, they couldn't be released from detention. I was fine with that. But agreeing to be their surety was necessary to proceed with my plans. Regarding the charges, the severity between negligence and arson was significant, so I was advised to settle with the victim first. That evening, after being released, I picked up the three, including Polly, from the child protection facility. All three looked haggard, their complexions pale and exhausted. The next day, we went to the junk removal service to apologize. The service said they were willing to settle if Vince and Rachel compensated for the damaged items. Just when I thought it was settled, Rachel hesitated to pay. "I didn't do anything wrong, and I don't have the money to compensate." At this point, what was Rachel even saying? Then she continued, "You should pay." "Why should I have to pay?" I retorted sharply to Rachel. "Then, we'll use the money from the food container." "Wait, what?" I explained with a smile that was almost too pleasant. "What's better for you? Using this money or going to jail for arson?" Rachel bowed her head, rendered speechless. The owner of the junk removal service, though dismayed, agreed. "If you compensate properly, that's fine by me." Eventually, I handed the food container to Rachel, and the money inside was used to cover the expenses. Though it wasn't enough, Vince covered the remainder, and the matter was resolved smoothly. Vince and Rachel seemed relieved, thinking everything was settled. On the way back, they even managed to smile. But this wasn't the end. My punishment for them was just beginning. It's not over yet. There's more to discuss, so follow me. Remember, you can't refuse. Vince and Rachel meekly responded, yes. I headed towards the empty house, with the three of them following me. Anxiety was etched on their faces. Once inside, we moved towards the living room. In the empty living room, Vince and Rachel stood awkwardly. Polly, perhaps feeling anxious, clutched the hem of Rachel's skirt. "It's about the divorce settlement. I'm not involved, right? Because we're already divorced." Vince retorted defiantly. I sighed in exasperation. "What are you talking about? You can claim alimony for up to 3 years after the divorce." I threw the detective agency's report, credit card statements, and other documents on the table. "Here's the evidence of the affair. Pretending to go on business trips, you went to Los Angeles with Rachel and others, spending holidays in Rachel's apartment." "I know everything." Vince opened his mouth in shock and then hung his head. A silent, awkward moment passed, as both shuffled uncomfortably, exchanging glances. I took a deep breath. "You've been lying to me all along." Now my gaze turned to Rachel. "And your domestic violence claims are lies." Rachel began frantically scratching her head, muttering, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know. I pulled out my mobile phone, showed Rachel the screen. And she screamed. No! On the mobile phone screen, a man is connected via video call. That's your ex-husband, right? I told him all about the lies. All of Rachel's claims of domestic violence were lies. The truth was that Rachel grew tired of her ex-husband and cheated. Her ex-husband said he divorced her without fully understanding the reasons. Rachel, facing the screen, starts apologizing. I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry. She sobbed, her face a mess of tears. Rachel met Vince while working at a night bar. Vince was drowning his sorrows there, and they hit it off and started dating. Both of you need to pay alimony. Rachel's ex-husband demanded his alimony back before ending the call. Rachel turned her anger towards Vince. Your plan failed. We couldn't take the house. Instead of getting alimony, we're the ones paying. My money is gone, and now we're paying for more troubles. You've brought so much misfortune. Vince retorted, frothing at the mouth. It's all because you hid the alimony in the fridge to avoid taxes. I watched them argue with amusement. Well, that's how it is. A lawyer will contact you. Then phone rang, and to which I answered. Are you arriving soon? It's an empty house, but make yourself comfortable. Vince is looking forward to it. Vince looked up at me, tear-streaked and snotty, with a look of apprehension. The doorbell rang. It's open, come on in. I'll be leaving through the back, but make sure you explain those initial lies properly. I told them and left the house through the back. Vince and Rachel exchanged looks, trembling. Imagining what would happen next, I couldn't stop laughing. As I emerged from the backyard to the front, a new car was parked in the driveway. From inside the house, Wally's loud voice could be heard shouting. Don't play with me! I had invited Wally and Shannon over, saying, I want to see the new car. Vince and Rachel got a severe scolding, and Vince was disowned. Vince, having been involved with the causing of fire, was fired from his job. Without any severance pay, he used all his savings to pay me alimony, and then had to beg his parents. Wally, though reluctant, paid me directly considering my situation. Vince now works around the clock at a factory, with no distinction between day and night. Rachel, to repay the money she swindled and for the alimony to me and her ex-husband, works late into the night on holidays. Polly managed to avoid being sent to a foster home but is sulky and fed up with living in a cramped wooden apartment with Vince and Rachel. The three of them are constantly fighting, often reprimanded by neighbors for being too loud. All this was told to me by Wally. The house we lived in was purchased by the state for road expansion. It was my favorite residence, but it couldn't be helped. The purchase price was higher than the market value, and I also received moving expenses. Thanks to this, I was able to set up a new office in the city. As for my graphic design work, I had previously declined packaging designs for rival companies out of consideration for Vince, but now I accept a wide range of projects. Perhaps because I have been honest in my work, orders are steady, and sales are increasing. I've expanded the scale of my business by hiring more staff. Having experienced a life deceived by others, living honestly without lying seems to be leading me to success. Lying leads to nothing good. This has become the motto of my life. Can't even cook a meal. Freeze out in the yard. With that, Ben closed the window and locked it from the inside. I immediately rushed to the window. Please! Open it! I pleaded, pounding on the window, but Ben just smirked and closed the curtains. I rubbed my body, freezing in the cold. I could feel the warmth that had been provided by the heater being stripped away from me. What should I do? If this continues, even the baby in my stomach. Just as I was about to lose consciousness due to the overwhelming cold and the shock of being locked out. Are you okay? A savior extended his hand to me. The next day, I returned home with him. In the yard, Ben was freezing naked. Surprised at the sight, Nick stepped forward. "You said it, didn't you? If you can't even cook properly, then freeze outside," Nick said to Ben, with a cold voice and gaze. Ben, who had been freezing in the yard, couldn't even respond properly. "I'll call an ambulance out of the last shred of mercy." "And want to say anything to him before they arrive?" Nodding to his words, I took a step closer to Ben. "My name is Anne. I'm a 28-year-old housewife. My mother passed away from an illness shortly after I started working. And then my father followed her, dying suddenly from a heart attack. As an only child, I was left alone, and I tried to fill the void by throwing myself into work." "And are you okay? You seem to be pushing yourself too hard." Ben, my husband, was the one who spoke to me. Ben was someone who would comfort my grieving heart. A person who would support me when I cried alone. After I had calmed down, he approached me, and we started dating. After a few years of dating, we got married. "I'm so happy for you, marrying such a lovely woman." "Ben has brought home a wonderful woman." After getting married, I started living with my in-laws. I had a good relationship with my in-laws. "And I saw on TV the other day that a new cafe opened near the station. Let's go there together sometime." "Yes, I'd love to." Especially with Jane, I hit it off well, going out to eat together once a week. I also got along well with Mike, who loves cooking, and we sometimes cooked together in the kitchen. "I'm happy you get along with my family. Though, Nick can be a bit troublesome, right?" "Not at all." I didn't talk much with Nick, my brother-in-law, because he works from home and often stays in his room. However, I was interested in his work, and when I asked about it, he kindly explained it to me. In this way, I got along well with my in-laws. A few years after getting married, I became pregnant with Ben's child. Due to severe morning sickness, I decided to quit my job. That's probably for the best. Don't push yourself. This wasn't a decision I made alone, but after thoroughly discussing it with my in-laws. With the earnings of Ben and Nick alone, we could live comfortably, and I had savings of my own. Mike was working, and Jane had a part-time job, so there were no issues with me quitting. Pregnant women are lucky. They don't have to work and no one complains. Recently, Ben started to complain about it. He was present at the discussion, and at the time, he was the first to suggest I should quit. Acting all high and mighty with no job. Who's acting high and mighty? When have I ever ordered you around? In fact, I'm the one picking up the clothes you've strewn about and putting them in the washer. But being naturally competitive, I always argued back and managed to outtalk Ben every time. If you had complaints, you should have brought them up during our discussion. Right. It was Ben who brought it up first. Exactly. Instead of complaining, take care of your own stuff. With the support of my in-laws, Ben found himself isolated without any help. Nick and Ben weren't on good terms, and Nick wouldn't side with Ben. Ben looks down on me because I work from home. He doesn't listen to what I have to say and doesn't consider me an ally. Nick would mutter such things. So he wouldn't even join in on these conversations. Ben seemed displeased with the situation, becoming even more complainative when we were alone. Don't get cocky just because my family likes you. I'm not getting cocky, everyone just has common sense. Even when it was just the two of us, I never lost to Ben. However, as morning sickness began to set in, I found myself losing the energy to argue back. Being pregnant isn't an illness. If you're not working, you're no different from a NEET. I agree that pregnancy isn't an illness, but and is risking her life to nurture a life. That alone is work enough. Nick came to my rescue. He would quickly come to my aid whenever Ben complained and report to my in-laws. While Ben was being scolded by my in-laws, he took care of me. "It's hard to tell who the dad is here," I muttered, stroking my belly. Well, with my in-laws keeping watch, maybe Ben will change eventually. Until then, I had believed in Ben. "Oh, Ben's not back yet?" "Seems like it." Just then, Ben started coming home late. He claimed it was overtime, but I couldn't be sure. Even on his days off. "I have to work on the weekend. It's busy, so I'll stay over at the company," he would say, and sometimes he wouldn't come home. Honestly, I suspected Ben of cheating. My in-laws thought the same and we divided tasks to gather evidence, but it was hard to come by. He only went in and out of the company, and there didn't seem to be any specific woman involved. "It's hard to know what's going on inside the company." I asked his colleagues, but they said there wasn't anything unusual. And don't push yourself. Around that time, my morning sickness worsened and I couldn't do any household chores. But it wasn't a problem since Mike did the cooking and Jane took care of the other chores, with Nick also helping out. "Aren't you ashamed?" "What?" "Lying around doing nothing as a housewife. What's the point of you being in this house?" Ben would wake me up in the middle of the night to say such things, seeing his parents doing the chores. And when I frowned, "A guy who does nothing as a husband has no right to say that," Nick argued back. "You always go against me, the eldest son." "That's because you're not a brother I can respect. You've always been insolent." This led to a brotherly fight, which was about to turn into a brawl before the in-laws, alerted by the noise, stopped them. They listened to the story and scolded Ben. "That's enough. Do whatever you want." "Wait, Ben! Where are you going?" Ben left without answering me. "I'm really sorry about Ben. We are truly sorry." My in-laws apologized on Ben's behalf, and that was the end of the discussion. But Ben's attitude was getting worse. Something had to be done soon. I was at loss. What should I do? Is something the matter? One Saturday, my in-laws were going on a trip to a local event. It was planned in advance, but they seemed concerned about Ben's recent attitude. "We're worried about leaving you behind." "It's okay. The morning sickness has gotten much better." I sent off my worried in-laws with a smile, and they left for a 2-night, 3-day trip. At the same time, Nick also had an overnight engagement. "I'm sorry to leave you at a difficult time." "Don't worry about it. Take care." Soon after the in-laws left, Nick also departed. Today, unusually, Ben was at home and still asleep. "Well then, I should do what I can," I muttered, standing up. Honestly, I still wasn't feeling well. But if I just lay down and did nothing, I wouldn't know what Ben will say, and fortunately, the fridge was filled with meals that Mike had prepared in advance. I began cleaning and doing laundry at a slow, manageable pace. "Hey, make me a meal." "Did you just wake up?" Ben finally woke up around noon. His hair was a mess, and he demanded a meal with a sullen face. While I was taken aback, I took out one of Mike's prepared meals from the fridge. "What's that?" You mean Mike's prepared meal? You're a housewife and can't even cook?" Hearing that made me instantly angry. Why should I be spoken to like that? Whose child do they think I'm carrying? I don't deserve to be treated like this. "I'm sorry, but right now, my job is to protect the child in my stomach. Looking after adults is secondary." "How dare you speak to your husband like that?" Just as Ben yelled at me, the door opened. Standing there was Nick. I could hear the yelling from outside. "You shut in!" Ben glared at Nick, muttered an insult, and went back to his room. It seemed like he made some noise before apparently leaving. Nick sighed at that. "Are you okay?" "Yes, but what brings you here?" "I came back for something I forgot," Nick said, looking worried. Seeing his expression reminded me of Jane, and I couldn't help but give a wry smile. "It's okay, really. Go on, off you go." "I'll be back." Nick looked at me with concern, hesitated, then left. Where did the Ben I first met disappear to? If things continue this way, divorce. But I still want to be family with my in-laws. Feeling tired, I decided to lie down for a bit. Closing my eyes, I soon fell into a deep sleep. "And it's time to wake up." "Ah." I woke up hastily, meeting the eyes of a smirking Ben. I had fallen asleep completely, expecting to be scolded by an exasperated Ben. "I'd let you sleep, but it's evening already." Contrary to my expectations, Ben spoke to me kindly. Surprised, I stared at him. "I've prepared dinner, so come eat once you're fully awake." Saying that, Ben left. A blanket was covering my body, had Ben. With that question in mind, I headed to the kitchen. There, Mike's prepared meals were warmed up, ready to eat. "I'm sorry, Anne." "Ben, I was happy to hear we were having a child, but I became incredibly anxious and took it out on Anne. This is my apology," Ben said, offering me a cake. Honestly, this gesture alone couldn't make up for his previous behavior. But I was genuinely happy he apologized. For the moment, I decided to forgive him, and we enjoyed the meal together. "Look, it's starting to snow." "Oh, really? Let's go have a look," Ben suggested, heading towards the balcony. Amused by his childlike behavior, I followed him. Indeed, in the dark of the night, the sight of white snow falling was beautiful. Coming from a region where it rarely snows, this was a fresh experience for me, and I carelessly moved closer. "Here, let's open the window a bit." "No, it's cold." "You'll be fine if you wear a jacket," Ben said, putting a jacket on me and opening the window. The cold air rushed in, and as I shivered, he pulled me by the arm. "Huh?" Before I knew it, I was outside. Turning around, I saw Ben smirking maliciously. "A housewife who doesn't do housework is a failure as a wife. Reflect on that overnight." "Huh? What are you talking about? Can't even cook a meal. Freeze out in the yard." With that, Ben closed the window and locked it from the inside. I immediately rushed to the window. "Please, open it." I pounded on the window, but Ben just smirked and closed the curtains. I rubbed my body, freezing from the cold. I could feel the warmth that had been provided by the heater being stripped away from me. What should I do? If this continues, even the baby in my stomach. Just as I was about to lose consciousness due to the overwhelming cold and the shock of being locked out. "Are you okay?" A savior extended his hand to me. He then helped me into his car. "Why are you outside on a night like this?" The one who helped me was Nick. Nick had cut his stay short, concerned about Ben. Feeling the car's heater warm me up, I exhaled. "Just to be safe, let's go to the hospital," Nick suggested, taking me to the hospital. Thanks to Nick's quick action, fortunately, both the baby and I were fine. And while I was being examined, Nick apparently arranged for a hotel stay. We were able to stay at the hotel, but Nick left for somewhere else. "I'm really glad. You're going to be a strong child." I caressed my belly with relief for having arrived at the hotel safely. I was truly glad nothing had happened. Exhausted from everything that had happened, I lay down on the bed and fell asleep. And are you okay now? Yes, thank you so much. No problem. Shall we go then? The next day, I returned home with him. In the yard, Ben was freezing naked. Surprised at the sight, Nick stepped forward. You said it, didn't you? If you can't even make a meal, freeze outside. Nick said to Ben with a cold voice and gaze. Ben, freezing in the yard, couldn't properly respond. I'll call an ambulance out of the last shred of mercy. And want to say anything to him before they arrive? Nodding to his words, I took a step closer to Ben. You almost caused our unborn child serious harm. I will never forgive you. Be prepared. Then Ben was taken to the hospital, and I asked Nick what had happened the night before. After dropping me off at the hotel, Nick returned home alone. He found Ben and a woman, who appeared to be his mistress, naked in the living room. It seems he invited his mistress over, thinking we wouldn't be home. With an out of the way, he felt completely at ease. Enraged, Nick apparently threw Ben out naked. See who the real trash is after spending the night outside, he said. Then, after intimidating the frozen mistress into giving up evidence, Nick forcibly sent her back to her own home. Apparently, the mistress had a family too, and by the time everything was reported, dawn was breaking. Nick took a nap in the car and then came to pick me up. My parents have been informed. They'll be coming home today, Nick said with a kind smile, staying close to me until my in-laws returned. It's okay now. Nick, thank you so much. No, I just did what anyone would. Thanks to him, I felt safe staying at home. Anne, I'm so sorry. We're truly sorry for what Ben has done. Upon their return, my in-laws immediately scolded Ben. It was decided that Ben would pay me compensation and child support before being kicked out. I'm sorry. It was a moment of folly. I truly love only Anne. Ben pleaded with me, but I ignored him. Just me? Enough with your foolishness. Don't look at me with those eyes. Then Ben flew into a rage and hit me. Enough! You idiot! Nick caught his hand. With Mike joining in, Ben was overwhelmed. Anne, I just gave in to temptation. Anne. I, embraced by Jane, watched him being driven away. He remained pitiful to the end. That's all I thought about Ben. Nick is really strong. Considering what had just happened and how he had managed to throw a grown man outside, I was amazed by Nick's strength. Yeah, Nick used to do judo. He wouldn't normally use his skills on anyone, though. Nick returned, laughing refreshingly at his own modesty, which unexpectedly made my heart skip a beat, and Jane laughed at my reaction. He's got a handsome face and strong arms. It's a mystery why he doesn't have a girlfriend. Quiet! Nick looked away, slightly embarrassed, which I found rather endearing. Given my situation of having no family or anyone else to rely on, I continued to stay with my in-laws. If you'd allow me, I'd love to hold the baby. Of course! Now, the four of us eagerly await the birth of our precious child. I learned from Nick that the mistress was a co-worker of Ben's. No wonder they wouldn't answer honestly when asked. They had been behaving like a couple at work. And the co-worker's husband thoroughly investigated after being informed. With that evidence, we both received adequate compensation and divorced. Both were fired for their actions during work hours and for claiming date expenses as work-related. The reason I know this is because I beg you, please forgive me. Ben came back to the in-laws' house. He pleaded for help, but how dare you show your face here? Don't burden it anymore. Never show us your face again. My in-laws drove him away with unanimous disapproval. Through it all, Nick was the most dependable, and I found myself drawn to him. Thank you for all your help. No problem. Wanting to help someone you like is natural, right? Huh? Nick's face turned red, and so did mine, influenced by his reaction. Then, I realized that Nick had liked me for a long time. Everyone seems to react negatively when I talk about my job, but you always listened earnestly. Seeing you interested in what I had to say, but you were Ben's wife, so I thought I should keep these feelings hidden. He said this looking down, causing me to look down as well. I had no idea he felt that way about me. Honestly, I'm not ready to be in that kind of relationship with anyone right now. I understand. But if you can wait a bit longer, I'd like to respond to those feelings. He looked up at my words. Then he smiled at me. Yes. I'll do my best to appeal to you from now on. I'll be ready. Our interaction was fully observed by my in-laws, making dinner that night an extravagant affair. Finally, Nick has a girlfriend. Stop it. Jane's excitement was evident, while Nick blushed and protested. Mike and I exchanged glances and laughed. Later, I gave birth to a beautiful daughter on the due date. She's so cute. Congratulations. She really looks like so cute. She's going to be a beauty. No man will leave her alone. I don't want to let her marry, Nick said, prompting the in-laws to chime in that he was getting ahead of himself. I couldn't help but laugh at Nick, who was already feeling like a father. Nick continued to be considerate towards me, actively participating in childcare. The in-laws were the same, ensuring someone was always there for me, allowing me to raise my daughter with peace of mind. And 100 days after breaking ties with Ben, I want to be her father. Please marry me. You're rushing it. First, we should date, right? Either is fine by me. Nick smiled happily at my words. This scene was again witnessed by Jane, who teased me about it afterward. Meanwhile, Ben, having been fired and forced to repay the embezzlement and compensation for me and our daughter, took on debt from dangerous sources and is now missing. Wherever he is, I hope he's managing. The in-laws are all doting on the grandchild, showing no concern for Ben. Nick seems to have forgotten Ben's existence altogether. Years later, I remarried Nick. Our daughter calls him Dad, and Nick has become a doting parent. We're having a boy next. That's great. Whether he looks like me or like a boy resembling would be nice too. I'm pregnant with our second child. Our daughter is excited to become a big sister. We're all thinking about what to name him. Likely going with our daughter's suggestion. And our daughter, and the new baby, I'll make you all happy. You're included in that too. We plan to live happily together. As a family of 6, we'll live closely and joyfully. That's a promise Nick and I have made. Looking forward to going out as a complete family once the baby arrives. I really need to talk to Lynn about something. Emily, my daughter-in-law, seems to hesitate for a moment, taking a deep breath. But then, as if she's made up her mind, she starts to speak with determination. I'm sorry, but I just can't do it anymore. I can't afford to pay $3,000 every month for Brian's care. It's just too much for me. She said this through tears. I couldn't understand what Emily was talking about. Paying $3,000 a month for care? What are you talking about? Brian passed away 8 years ago. You should know that. What? But Ridley said we needed money for the care. I wasn't told he passed away. I don't understand what's happening. Emily seemed genuinely unaware. Even I am struggling to grasp the situation, but it's an undeniable fact that my husband Brian has passed away. I really wasn't told about his passing. It's the truth. Emily was desperately trying to make her case. Based on Emily's behavior up until now, I was convinced she wasn't lying, and I knew she wasn't the type to make up such a story. About 6 months ago, Ridley came to me saying we needed money for Brian's care. He said our parents had sent us a lot of money during our student days, and now it was his turn to send money. Hearing Emily's frail voice, I felt a rage like never before. I could easily imagine how troubled Emily had been. I was convinced that my son Ridley was lying. Given the circumstances, there was no doubt about it. I could forgive a lot, but not telling his wife about Brian's death and asking her for money was unforgivable. I had to make Ridley reflect on his actions. Otherwise, I wouldn't know what to say to Brian in heaven. I made up my mind and approached Emily with a proposal. Listen, we're going to gather evidence of Ridley's wrongdoing together. We'll make sure he can't make any excuses. Then, we'll confront him with it. My name is Lynn. After graduating from nursing school, I started working at a state public hospital. The job was tough, but it's where I had a fateful encounter with Brian. He initially came to my hospital as a patient, and I was assigned to be his nurse. During his care, he shared many stories with me. I was somewhat intrigued by him, so I often engaged in our conversations. The conversations we shared during those tough days at work became my greatest joy. And then, when he was about to be discharged, he gave me his contact information. Let's get in touch if you'd like. I didn't hesitate to contact him immediately. And so, we started dating officially. I later learned that he had fallen for me at first sight, and was desperately trying to get my attention by striking up conversations. I came to deeply love him for that. Our relationship continued without any major fights because he was such a kind person. And eventually, we got married. Even after marriage, my relationship with Brian was just fine. And a few years later, our son Ridley was born. From that time, Brian became busy with work and was rarely at home. But when the family was together, we would happily go out to eat or travel. Several more years passed, and Ridley went on to college. His college was quite far from home, reachable only by airplane. I felt a sense of vulnerability sending my son so far away, but convinced myself it was for his future. Ridley would come home during long holidays, and he seemed even brighter than before, which reassured me. However, being a STEM college, the expenses seemed to be quite high. Ridley often asked me to send him money. Mom, I'm sorry, but I'm short on money this month. Can you send me some? Didn't I just send you some recently? What are you spending all this money on? It's for school stuff. The books they require us to buy are all specialized and really expensive. Plus, the equipment and materials for research cost quite a bit too. Ridley pleaded desperately. And there's also living expenses. It's really tough, even with the part-time job. I can't keep up. Ridley said, sounding almost on the verge of tears. Hearing his voice made my heart ache. I wondered how anxious Ridley must be, living so far from home. Our own financial situation wasn't easy, but I felt compelled to help no matter what. Okay, I understand. I'll send it by the end of this week, so don't worry. Thank you, Mom. Ridley's voice brightened up upon hearing my response, filling me with an indescribable joy. This exchange continued until Ridley graduated from college. After graduation, Ridley successfully found a job in a company in the city. I wished he could come back to his hometown, but it couldn't be helped. The university was a plane ride away, but now he was just a long train ride away. It was somewhat closer, so I had to be content with that. However, Ridley became busier with work and visited home even less. Ridley, when will you come home next? Let me know when you decided. Sorry, Mom. Work's been so hectic. I don't see myself coming home anytime soon. It's like I hardly have any days off, and sometimes my boss calls me in unexpectedly. So, I really can't afford to come home. It sounds tough. It's good to work hard, but don't overdo it. If you break down, it's all for nothing. Make sure to reach out if things get too hard. Yeah, I got it. Thanks. Ridley said this and quickly hung up the phone. His somewhat indifferent attitude pained me. But I told myself it couldn't be helped. Ridley was a grown adult, after all. It was probably overbearing for me to say too much now. I tried to suppress my loneliness and convinced myself of this. I also made a point not to call Ridley. I didn't want to interrupt his work. For a while, we didn't communicate. But then, one day, Ridley called me out of the blue. Lynn, it's been a while. Is now a good time? It's fine. What's going on? Well, I've decided to get married. What? What do you mean? I happened to meet someone and we got along well. So, we decided to get married. I've already met her parents. We'll be coming home soon to introduce her to you. I see. I'll be looking forward to it. I said this and hung up the phone. Ridley was getting married. And just the thought made my heart flutter. I wondered what kind of woman she could be. Would I be able to see my grandchildren? All sorts of thoughts raced through my mind. I was so happy that I marked the calendar with a big sign. And then the day finally came. Ridley's girlfriend, named Emily, was a quiet, beautiful, and kind-hearted woman with a sharp mind. I liked her immediately. She seemed perfect for Ridley. There was no reason to oppose their marriage, and things moved quickly. Ridley and Emily were soon happily married. After the wedding, Emily would help me with my work whenever Ridley was home. It seemed that Emily thought highly of me too, and there was no sign of any mother-in-law and daughter-in-law conflict. However, as time passed, Ridley became busier and had almost no time to come home. Even though we would occasionally talk on the phone, those calls became rare. I was lonely, but I guessed young people preferred spending time with each other. Out of consideration for Ridley and his wife, I decided not to call unless it was an emergency. After that, we hardly communicated. There was no interaction after they called to wish me a happy birthday, and time passed by. But a year later, Emily suddenly called. Lynn, it's been a while. Emily spoke in a heavy, somber tone. I was concerned by her demeanor, but chose not to press the issue. Oh, Emily, it's been a while. How's Ridley doing? Yes, he's fine. But there's something I just have to tell you. Something you have to say? What happened? Emily seemed to hesitate for a moment, taking a deep breath. But then, as if she had made up her mind, she began to speak earnestly. I'm sorry, but I just can't do it anymore. I can't afford to pay $3,000 every month for Brian's care. It's just too much for me. Emily said this through tears. I couldn't grasp what Emily was saying. $3,000 a month for care? What are you talking about? Please don't joke about this. But how can there be care expenses? Brian passed away 8 years ago. You should know that, shouldn't you? What? But Ridley told me we needed money for care. I haven't heard anything about him passing away. What's going on here? I'm completely lost. Emily seemed genuinely unaware. I was having trouble understanding the situation myself. But there's no denying the fact that Brian has passed away. Listen, Emily, Brian passed away 8 years ago due to his illness worsening. He was indeed in need of care before that. I said this carefully, trying not to upset Emily. I did tell Ridley about how tough Brian's care was. But I never asked for money. I can't believe it. I wasn't told anything about his passing. It's true. Emily pleaded desperately. I was convinced she wasn't lying, based on her behavior up to now. I knew she wasn't the type to say such things. I recalled the time when Brian passed away and explained it to Emily in as much detail as possible. When Brian was critically ill, and it was clear he was in danger, I contacted Ridley. He came home then. Emily gasped over the phone. She might not have known even that. But you didn't come. I heard you were busy with an overseas business trip and couldn't possibly come back here, I said, feeling a pang in my heart. But at that time, I was so preoccupied with Brian that I didn't have the capacity to consider Emily's situation. Overseas business trip? I'm an office worker. I don't go on trips abroad. In fact, I've never been on a business trip, Emily exclaimed, seemingly shocked. Why would Ridley say such a thing? Where did all the care money I've been paying go? Emily was clearly shaken over the phone. But after a while, she began to explain the situation slowly. This started about 6 months ago. Ridley came to me saying we needed money for Brian's care. He mentioned how our parents sent us money during our student days, and now it was his turn to send money. Hearing Emily's frail voice, I felt an unprecedented wave of anger. So, I initially paid willingly. But the amount kept increasing, and now it's $3,000 a month. Emily sighed deeply after saying that. And I could easily imagine how much she had been struggling. I've been dipping into my savings to make the payments, but honestly, I've reached my limit. That's why I called. Hearing Emily's words, I was convinced that Ridley was lying. The situation made it clear. Forgiving minor things is one thing, but not telling his wife about Brian's death and asking for money is unforgivable. If this demand escalates, it could even lead to a criminal case. I must make Ridley reflect on his actions. Otherwise, I wouldn't know what to say to Brian in heaven. I resolved to do something and approached Emily with a suggestion. Emily, I believe you. It's clear Ridley is lying. Is that so? I was foolish. If only I had spoken to you sooner, this wouldn't have happened. No, it's not your fault. But we can't let this go. Listen, let's gather evidence of Ridley's wrongdoing together. We'll collect enough so he can't make any excuses, and then we'll confront him with it. Understood. What should I do? Well, Emily, I'd like you to gather any evidence you can find at home. Do you have a study or something? There should be receipts and documents there. I'll hire a detective agency to investigate Ridley's background. There's probably more to this. Got it. I'll carefully collect evidence without being noticed and look through messages to see if there's any information about Ridley. I'll contact you if I find anything. Emily said this and then hung up the phone. At first, she was unsettled, but now, there wasn't a trace of that to be seen. With that attitude, he's bound to thoroughly search for evidence. I started looking online for a detective agency and immediately requested an investigation into Ridley's background. Several weeks later, I visited Ridley's house. I had asked Emily about Ridley's day off in advance. Guided by Emily, I headed towards the living room. Unaware of anything, Ridley was relaxing in the living room. He was surprised to see me enter. "What? Mom, what brings you here all of a sudden? You could have let me know you were coming." "Sorry for not telling you in advance. I just needed to talk to you about something." "I see. But I have to step out for a bit. Emily will fill you in on the details." It seemed Ridley sensed something was off. He suddenly got up in a hurry, looking to leave the scene. "Sit down," I yelled at Ridley. He looked surprised and flustered. Emily, with a blank expression, went over to Ridley and made him sit on the sofa. Ridley looked back and forth between me and Emily, his face clearly showing his distress. "You know, Ridley, I got a call from Emily the other day. She told me you've been making her pay $3,000 a month for Brian's care expenses." Upon hearing this, Ridley's expression twisted, and he bit his lip, realizing his actions had been discovered. "But that's strange, isn't it? Because Brian is no longer with us. So, who exactly are these care expenses for? I'd like to hear it from you." Ridley didn't answer right away. He looked down and scratched his head. "Not going to answer? Then let's change the question. Emily didn't know that Brian had passed away." Emily looked down at Ridley with cold eyes. "You said she couldn't come because she was on a business trip abroad, right? But Emily has never been on a business trip, let alone abroad. What do you have to say about that?" Ridley remained silent, still looking down. "Say something," I shouted even louder than before. I was furious at Ridley for choosing to remain silent at such a time. Emily's lips were pressed tightly together as she glared at Ridley. Ridley sighed deeply and rubbed his face with his hands. "Listen, we already know you've been lying. We've gathered plenty of evidence to prove it. So, staying silent now is pointless." I said this in a more admonishing tone. Scolding him wouldn't make him reflect. I wanted him to understand why what he did was wrong. "Now, about the $3,000 you conned out of Emily. What did you use it for? Tell me the truth." Ridley was silent for a while, but eventually, he began to speak weakly. "I wanted to use that money to start a business. My current job is so tough. I thought starting my own business would increase my income and allow me to work more freely." Ridley murmured, clearly shaken. I wanted to immediately rebut, but I decided to let him finish speaking first. "I know I did something wrong to you guys. But I thought you'd be against it if I told you the truth, so I couldn't bring myself to say it. I'm really sorry." After saying this, Ridley got up from the sofa and apologized. "Well, I appreciate your honesty. Look at me," I said gently. Ridley, seemingly relieved, looked up, but he was met with documents and photos I dropped in front of him. They were the detective's report and documents Emily had found at home. Upon seeing them, Ridley's face turned pale. "It seems you've been borrowing money from various places since your college days. And despite that, you've been splurging on girls at bars. You've been living quite lavishly, haven't you? And that's not all. You even took out loans in my name." Emily said this and shoved the documents in Ridley's face. "I had no idea about any of this. You're dissatisfied with just $3,000 a month? Am I just someone convenient for you to get money from? Say something." Emily seemed to have reached her limit, grabbing Ridley by the collar in frustration. "Enough, Ridley. As I said earlier, we know all about your lies, and we have all the evidence we need. I stopped Emily and explained again to Ridley, who, frightened by Emily's scolding, listened quietly. We know how you've been spending your money and what your personal life is like. There's no use hiding anything now. Ridley groaned softly, ruffling his hair. But I continued undeterred. We want to hear everything from you. Understand? So, start talking. This time, Ridley seemed genuinely remorseful. He began to speak through tears. I'm sorry, truly sorry. It was all a lie. Tears fell from Ridley's eyes, forming puddles on the floor. Back in college, I asked for money not for textbooks, but because I wanted money to have fun. I didn't have a part-time job. I spent all the money on shopping and hanging out with friends. Hearing Ridley finally tell the truth brought me some relief. And what about after you started working? After I started working, I went to bars after work. I took a liking to one of the girls there and ended up spending a lot of money on her. If I didn't, she wouldn't pay me any attention. But you've been spending more than you earn, haven't you? How did you manage that? By the time I realized, I couldn't borrow money in my name anymore. But I still had to pay back my debts. So, I started borrowing money in Emily's name. I secretly took her ID and completed the procedures online. Emily looked like she wanted to say something upon hearing this. But I gestured for her to wait. I had decided we would only interject after he had confessed everything. I had no other choice. But when that wasn't an option anymore, I lied about needing money for care expenses to get it from Emily. I'm really sorry. Ridley broke down in tears like a child after saying this. But the ones who truly deserved to cry were Emily and me. I exchanged a look with Emily and sighed deeply. Emily seemed to have lost the will to scold him any further at the sight of Ridley's pathetic state. After sobbing for a while, Ridley apologized again. I'm truly sorry. I deeply regret my actions and promise I won't do it again. I swear it right here. I'll definitely pay back the money. Please forgive me. Ridley apologized sincerely. But his words were hard to trust. He had been deceiving those close to him for so long. Even if we forgave him, it was almost certain he would just repeat his actions. Ridley, it's over. We can't trust anything you say. We never intended to forgive you. And this isn't the end. Be prepared. An hour later, the doorbell of the house rang. Emily went to answer it. Ridley watched her apprehensively. Led in by Emily, the newcomers were women. Upon seeing their faces, Ridley caught his breath. You recognize these women, Ridley. They're your ex-girlfriends. Don't pretend you've forgotten. You've been living off these women, haven't you? Emily glared at Ridley as she spoke coldly. Why? Why are all of you here? We found out you were living off these women thanks to Lynn's investigation. So I reached out to them, saying I wanted to apologize from the bottom of my heart. Upon seeing their faces, Ridley caught his breath. Despair appeared in Ridley's eyes. Then, word spread. Thanks to that, your ex-girlfriends have come together, wanting to support me. Please, express all the feelings you've been holding inside. Emily's words were the signal for the start. One by one, Ridley's ex-girlfriends began to reveal his misdeeds. Ridley's face turned red from the overwhelming revelations, enduring the embarrassment. I, too, felt a deep sense of shame listening to it all. Wondering where I went wrong in raising my son. And how he ended up in this situation. The exposure made me wish I could disappear from the sheer embarrassment. After the revelations, Emily placed divorce papers on the table. Ridley, I can't live with you anymore. Please sign these divorce papers right now. And write a promissory note to pay compensation and repay the loans you took out in my name. No, please, Emily, let's be rational about this. This isn't right. I'll truly change, so please reconsider. I'd be lost without you right now. Ridley pleaded pitifully, but his ex-girlfriends unanimously scolded him to get real. Not a single person in the room was on Ridley's side. Reluctantly, Ridley signed the divorce papers and wrote a promissory note and affidavit complying with Emily's demands. Afterward, Ridley, now in tears, turned to me, begging for help. Mom, I'm really sorry. This is my last selfish request. Please help me with the repayments. I know I've done wrong by lying, but I can't do this alone. Please. Lynn, you don't need to help him. Just leave him be. I looked into Ridley's eyes, reminiscing about the warmth of holding him for the first time. The warmth of holding Ridley for the first time, the joyful days spent with Brian and the three of us, the sense of vulnerability when sending Ridley off to college. It all comes back to me as if it were just yesterday. Despite his faults, he was still my son. All right, Ridley. No matter what you've done, you're my irreplaceable son. Ridley's eyes lit up with joy at my words. I don't believe I'm entirely blameless. Perhaps I made you feel lonely without realizing it. I was overwhelmed with remorse towards Ridley. So, I'll take responsibility too. I promise to take care of you until the end. Thank you, Mom. Thank you so much. Ridley held my hands, apologizing through his tears. Just then, the doorbell rang again, and Emily went to answer it. Several well-dressed, stout men entered the living room. Good afternoon. We are here following a request. Is this gentleman Ridley? One of the men confirmed in a low voice. Yes, that's him. We've finished our discussion, so please take him now. Understood. The men briefly responded, then lifted Ridley by his arms and made him stand. Caught off guard, Ridley screamed and resisted, but he was no match for the men's strength. Mom, who are these people? What do you mean they're taking me? Stop. Let me go. I do want to help you get back on your feet, but I'm getting older and that's becoming difficult. So, I consulted with the detective agency, and they recommended a good rehabilitation facility. I paused there. My heart was aching as if it were being torn apart. Ridley looked at me with tears in his eyes. With determination, I met his gaze and declared, "You're going there to be re-educated and fix your rotten self. This is my final act of sympathy for you. This can't be happening. Let me go. Please, Emily, anyone, help me." Ridley desperately pleaded for help, but Emily and his ex-girlfriends remained unmoved, watching him with cold eyes. It's a safe place, not dangerous. You'll just have your daily life and work managed while living there. If you truly are sorry, you'll follow their guidance, won't you? No, I don't want this. I swear, I really won't do anything bad again. Please help me. Ridley struggled as he was taken away. That's when I finally shed tears. I didn't want to do this. But the issue was too significant. If not rehabilitated now, Ridley could bring misery not only upon himself, but also upon many others. I'm so sorry, Ridley. I apologized from the bottom of my heart. Emily came over and comforted me. There were tears in her eyes as well. Sending Ridley to the facility resolved everything for the moment. The debts Ridley had accumulated on his own would now be his responsibility to repay. So far, he has been making regular monthly payments into Emily's account without issue, as the total amount was too large for a lump sum payment. It will undoubtedly take a long time before Ridley has repaid everything. This is all a matter of personal responsibility. I've been able to keep up with Ridley's situation through occasional updates from the facility staff. Initially, it seems Ridley attempted to escape whenever he saw an opportunity. However, the dedicated efforts of the facility's staff in educating him have led to him now leading a quiet life, following the daily routine. I can only hope that he truly reforms from the bottom of his heart. Emily has been living alone since then. Fortunately, her salary is sufficient, so she doesn't seem to be struggling financially. I deeply regret what happened and feel truly sorry for Emily. She might have faced significant life disruptions due to debts she had no part in. Just thinking about it makes me feel like I can never apologize enough to Emily. However, Emily doesn't seem to hold anything against me. In her view, Ridley is the one at fault, not me. Moreover, Emily still visits my home every few months, mainly for sightseeing purposes. The main focus, it seems, is on tourism. Every time they visit, they bring various gifts, share stories, and help with household chores. Even though our official in-law relationship has ended, our bond feels closer than ever. After Brian's passing and sending Ridley to the facility, Emily's visits have become a significant source of joy for me. Now, I look forward to her visits and live a peaceful life on my own. I'll give you a kid with developmental disabilities, Scarlett, my son's arrogant wife, said to me. A strong hatred for her stirring up inside me. She doesn't love her own children. She only sees them as tools for making money. My anger towards her reached its peak, and I decided to take my grandchild away from her. Then, I'll raise her. I set the condition that she would never be involved with her child again, and arranged for an adoption. 10 years later, Scarlett, triggered by a certain event, came to regret her choices. My name is Grace. I work as a proofreader. A proofreader is someone who checks for errors in manuscripts and layout prints at publishing companies, like for books and magazines. My husband, Henry, is a film director. He's made a name for himself as a capable director, having worked on a wide range of projects from animations to suspense and horror films. We, a creative couple, had one son. He grew up splendidly, found a wonderful wife, and got married. They were blessed with children. But soon after the marriage, our son tragically died in an accident. Losing our only son, Henry and I were engulfed in sorrow. But perhaps it was even harder for Scarlett, our son's wife. At the young age of 33, she became a widow and raised her 2 daughters by herself. Moreover, the girls were twins, and the younger one, Mia, showed signs of developmental disabilities. Her sister is Emma. At the time, Mia's condition was diagnosed as mild, but as she grew, her symptoms became more evident, and now she attends a special education class at the same elementary school as Emma. Raising a child with disabilities is no ordinary task. Especially for Scarlett, who lost her husband so early, her days must be incredibly hard. Of course, my husband and I try to support her in every way we can. She has a job, so during times like evenings when she can't take care of the kids, we take them in. Still, the hardships she's faced since our son's death are unimaginable. I am grateful to her. She truly cared for her children. Until she became obsessed with a certain man. Her personality changed after meeting this man. Grace, I'm taking Emma to her piano class, so I'll drop Mia off at your place. I should be there in about 5 minutes. That was a sudden, unexpected call. Previously, Scarlett used to check my schedule and show consideration, but lately, it's always been abrupt. She might know her piano class schedule in advance, yet she calls out of the blue, wanting to drop off Mia without any prior discussion. It's not just inconvenient for me, but for Henry as well, who has his own work. Scarlett, I think it's admirable how much you care for Emma. But if you're going to ask us to take Mia in suddenly every time, we have our own schedules too. Wait, aren't you off today, Grace? I saw on the calendar that you have every Tuesday off this month. Scarlett knew everything about our work and home schedule, as she often brought the kids over. It felt invasive, like being monitored. There are things we can only do on our days off. Please, don't just leave the kids with us without discussing it first. It's not that we don't want to take them. It's just a bit troublesome without any prior notice. I understand. I'll be more careful from now on. There was a brief pause, and Scarlett's reply sounded listless. Accompanying her perfunctory response was a faint clicking of her tongue. Before I could respond, she abruptly ended the call. Soon after, I heard Scarlett's car parking outside. Suppressing my exasperation, I got up from my chair to head to the door. Then, I overheard an unbelievable remark from the entrance. Mia, just go on to Grandma's by yourself. From the entrance, I heard Scarlett's condescending voice speaking to Mia, leaving me shocked and speechless. Moreover, I only heard the sound of the door opening once. Meaning, Scarlett didn't even get out of the car, she just told Mia something and then drove off again. Surprised by this unbelievable situation, I hurried to the entrance and found Mia left there alone. Mia. Where's your mom? Where did she go? Mia, not understanding the situation, looked at me with a puzzled expression. I placed my hands on Mia's shoulders, asking her what happened, but she just kept staring at me, puzzled, not attempting to answer my question. Grandma. Good evening. Mia is in elementary school, but she's delayed in speech, only able to communicate in two-word sentences. She can't answer complicated questions, and when bombarded with them, she tends to get stuck. At this moment, not understanding my question, Mia, contrary to my anxious mood, just smiled sweetly and continued to look at me. Mia, where did your mom go? Shopping? Piano class? Which one? When speaking to her, I know I shouldn't get emotional. If I convey words in haste, she also gets affected and may panic. I took a deep breath to calm myself and, showing my fists alternately with my hands, I tried to make it easier for Mia to choose an answer. Thanks to that, she seemed to understand the question and pointed to the right fist I held out secondly, uttering surprising words. Piano. Went with Emma and a man. A man. Hearing this intriguing word, I impulsively asked her more questions. Is he Mom's friend? Emma's friend? No. Mom's favorite person. Seeing her talk happily made my heart ache. Scarlett left a daughter behind to go to Emma's piano class with a new man. But why leave only Mia? The answer would soon become clear. That night, after piano class was over and it was getting time for Scarlett to pick Mia up, she didn't show up at our house. Fortunately, the next day was Saturday, so having Mia stay over wasn't a problem, but it was still incredibly rude. Scarlett left her with us without any notice. What's happening to her? I kept repeating these complaints in my mind while waiting with Mia for Scarlett to pick her up. Little did I know then, Scarlett's life was spiraling out of control. Hello, Grace? Sorry, but could you let Mia stay over tonight? Emma has come down with a fever. I don't want Mia to catch it, so could you look after her? It was past 9 p.m. I had finished giving Mia a shower and dinner, and was just waiting for Scarlett to pick her up when she called. Scarlett's voice on the phone didn't sound hurried, just apologetically casual. If I hadn't known the situation from Mia, I might not have doubted her words. But, having heard Mia's earlier story, I couldn't easily believe Scarlett. All right. We'll take care of her tonight. Realizing my reluctance, Henry, who was playing with Mia, turned to me and said so with a stern expression. I relayed to Scarlett that we would take care of Mia just for tonight. I understand the situation. But you knew about this sooner, right? How many hours has it been since piano class ended? Sorry. I was just about to pick her up when she started looking unwell. I'll be more careful next time." Her nonchalant reply only increased my anger. "From now on, please make sure to contact us in advance. If not, we might find it difficult to take her in the future." "Yes. Thank you so much." She responded sweetly and ended the call unilaterally. Dumbfounded and speechless, I returned to Mia and Henry, and that's when things got tough. "Mia, how about spending today with Grandpa and Grandma? Your mom can't pick you up because she's taking care of Emma who's sick." Maybe the way I said it was not good. Mia, having already decided in her mind that she was going home, got upset when her routine was disrupted. Mia, in a state of panic, began to wander restlessly around, crying and repeating that she wanted to go home. She curled up on the spot, trying to calm herself down, but it seemed she couldn't switch off her emotions. Sitting down, then standing up, repeating this over and over, she eventually collapsed onto a nearby sofa and started to cry intensely. "I'm sorry, it's my fault." "It's okay. Let's just be there for Mia right now." We've encountered situations like this several times before. When she was younger, her tantrums were much worse, becoming so violent that she was uncontrollable. She would hit herself against walls or slap her hands on the floor, a far worse state compared to now. As she grew, perhaps maturing, her symptoms seemed to stabilize, now manifesting as crying intensely on the sofa. When Mia gets like this, both Henry and I stay by her side, never intervening or trying to do anything forceful. Mia, in her way of calming down, uses our hands to wipe her tears, seeking comfort through physical touch. But we don't initiate it. Mia has her own timing and needs. We've learned over these 6 years it's important to respond to her in that manner. "I'm sorry." When Mia calms down, she always apologizes to us, perhaps thinking she'll be scolded for crying. Her eyes, wet with tears, stare at us, trembling with fear. At that moment, we had no idea that this behavior was a result of Scarlett's treatment. "We're not mad at you. In fact, I'm sorry, Mia. I said something hard to you." Good girl, good girl." Though she might not understand my words, she seemed to read my emotions from my expression. Mia, kneeling in front of me, gently stroked my hair. Even if her words are limited, her heart is so kind. What does a disability matter? It's just a part of who she is, her unique character. I love this gentle side of her. Thinking this and smiling, I heard Henry's voice suggesting it's time to sleep, and Mia, now ready to switch to bedtime mode, happily went with Henry to the bedroom. The next morning, a grim-faced Emma and Scarlett in a slovenly outfit arrived. "Thank you for yesterday." Emma's fever seems to have gone after sleeping all night, which really helped. Scarlett said in a manner as if a heart emoji should be at the end of her sentence, without a hint of remorse. Next to her, Emma looked upset for some reason. Curious, I was about to speak, but Mia, seeing her mother, lit up and rushed to embrace her, leaving me with no choice but to keep quiet. "Mom, you're back." "Mia." "I'm back, let's go home." Scarlett spoke to Mia as she hugged her. At that moment, I felt something off in Scarlett's smile. For a brief moment, it seemed like a look of laziness towards Mia. It was so brief that I couldn't be sure. Was it just my frustration from yesterday making me see things, or was there really something off? Unsure of the fleeting feeling, I couldn't confront her about it. "Then, we'll visit again soon." As Scarlett said this and took Mia's hand heading to the car, an angry-looking Emma handed me a letter. "Read this after we leave," Emma whispered, passing me the letter discreetly, making sure Scarlett didn't hear. Sensing something was seriously wrong, I took the letter without asking any further questions. After Scarlett left, I called Henry into the living room, and we read Emma's letter together. It contained shocking information. "Mom changed after finding a new boyfriend. She's hardly home and gives money to this man. She's using the prize money I won from a piano competition and a concert to pay him. She's leaving Mia with Grandma and Grandpa because this man has started to dislike Mia and finds her annoying. She sees me as a tool to earn money through piano. Soon, Mom might push Mia onto Grandma and Grandpa permanently. I'm okay, but please look after Mia. I was stunned and speechless at the unbelievable content of the letter, and at the end of it, I noticed what appeared to be a mobile phone email address. I remembered Scarlett mentioning that Emma's piano talents blossomed when she entered elementary school and that her lessons had become busier. Emma, even as a young child, had gained media attention for her skills and had now become a piano prodigy, attracting nationwide attention. Things have become rather dangerous lately, so I decided to give her a mobile phone. It seems normal these days for elementary school kids to have one, and I thought it wouldn't be a problem. If she's receiving media attention, it's a natural concern and precaution for a parent to have. I remember hearing this story and thinking how times have changed. This email address must belong to Emma's mobile phone. Emma is quite a smart girl. If she's written down her mobile phone address, it means she isn't being monitored by Scarlett. It must be safe to contact her there. Believing this to be Emma's address, I decided to reach out. Good evening. Is this Emma's address? Yes, it's me. Thanks for reading my letter. Grandma, please help Mia. I received this reply after 10 p.m. Probably just as she was going to bed. I then exchanged several messages with Emma. Tell me more about what's happening. Make sure to delete our messages afterward. Of course. I wasn't really sick yesterday. It was all a lie so Mom could go see her boyfriend. I was left at a friend's house, and Mom went out with him. He seems to be in a band, and Mom's always following him around. She's using the money I earn from piano competitions to spend time with him. I don't really mind, but Mia, she's treated terribly at home. Mia doesn't understand and always smiles, but after being scolded, she cries a lot and is inconsolable. Mom prioritizes her boyfriend over us now. She's happy when I give her money. But as long as Mia is around, Mom will continue to treat her horribly. The boyfriend even said to leave Mia with you and Grandpa. Mia might be happier with you. So please, help Mia. I'll do anything for her. Reading the message to the end, I couldn't stop my tears. Such a young girl, only 6 years old, desperately trying to protect her sister. Especially since she's the same age as her. Sacrificing herself without a second thought. What a terrible mother to make such a young child feel this way. What are you planning to do? You could be in danger too. I'll be okay. Mom needs me as long as I can play the piano. If it gets too much, I'll threaten to quit. I want to become better at piano. If that means using them to my advantage. That man seems well connected in the industry, so I'll use that to my advantage. So don't worry about me. But please, take care of Mia. I can't protect her. Can she really be only 6 years old? Her maturity made me feel her strength. But we never know what might happen. Not to overdo it, to rely on us if things get tough. And to keep in touch without fail. And be careful not to lose contact. I promised her 3 things. I agreed to help Emma. A month later, Scarlett's irresponsible behavior continued, and we were constantly being inconvenienced. But we couldn't let anything happen to Mia. We even started to say that we wanted to take care of Mia ourselves to protect her and keep our promise to Emma. One day, Scarlett came to our house with Mia, asking for a favor. I might be going abroad soon. What? Henry, listening with me, also looked shocked. Emma's piano teacher thinks highly of her talent. She might get to study with a famous teacher in Italy. If she does well there, she'll become a world-famous pianist. That's why I came to ask if you could take care of Mia. It's impossible to take her abroad. I couldn't help but doubt Scarlett's story. Emma hadn't mentioned anything like this. There was no reason for her to keep such a big secret. I stared at Scarlett suspiciously. Can you take Mia upstairs? I need to talk to Scarlett alone. Henry seemed to understand from my expression. He took Mia and left the living room. Tell me the truth. What? Emma going abroad, such a sudden decision isn't plausible, is it? Also, The last time you left Mia with us, a friend of mine saw you walking around town with a man. If you keep hiding the truth unnecessarily, I'll have to take appropriate action. What's the real reason? Tell me the truth. The story about a friend spotting her was a lie. But I thought it necessary to shake her up. Fooled by my words, Scarlett revealed her true colors. If you already knew everything, you should have said so earlier. There was no need for such an act. What? Her sudden change in demeanor took me by surprise. Her tone and attitude were so unbelievable that I couldn't see her as the kind Scarlett I knew. To be clear, Mia is a nuisance. Just saying she has a developmental disability lowers my chances of remarrying significantly. Emma's success does offset that to some extent, but being a mother of a child with disabilities, nobody wants to associate with me. So, for my and Emma's happiness, I want you to take Mia. It's better for Emma to have a father, right? It would be good for my mental health too. Scarlett spoke nonchalantly, without a hint of remorse. I was speechless, unable to comprehend her words. She said something even more surprising. In short, I'm giving Mia to you. Emma is all I need. You are happy about having a grandchild, so it works out perfectly, right? She talked about Mia being a useless burden and a financial strain, laughing. I couldn't recognize her as a human being. Mia still loves her as a mother. Mia, so pure and earnest, loves her mother despite the terrible treatment. Thinking of Mia's feelings made me furious at Scarlett's attitude and words. But I didn't want to argue. For us, Mia is a precious remnant of our son. Rather than being raised by such a worthless parent, we wanted to take care of her and make her happy. Calming myself, I responded to her words. Then, I'll raise her. In return, you'll never see Mia again. I'll tell her that her mother has passed away. For her sake, never call yourself her mother again. Don't ever show up in front of her. Yeah. Do whatever you want. I'm happy to get rid of such a useless child. Scarlett said this, stretched her arms out wide as if relieved. And left our house without telling Mia anything. Thus, Mia came to live with us as our adopted daughter. Of course, the first few months were tumultuous. Mia was distraught over her mother's absence, causing a great deal of mental strain. We reached out to doctor acquaintances, invited specialists to our home, and collaborated with therapeutic institutions, focusing on her support. Thanks to that, a few months later, Mia returned to school and was able to live a more settled life. 10 years later. When Mia was in her first year of high school, an incident occurred. One afternoon, someone repeatedly rang our doorbell. It was a holiday, and we were spending time together as a family. Who could it be, ringing the bell so many times? Irritated by the rude visit, I went to the door and grimaced when I saw who it was through the peephole. I know you're there. Come out. Give back Mia, you thieving family. There stood Scarlett, whom we had cut ties with 10 years ago, and a flamboyantly dressed man. Possibly he is the boyfriend from the rumors. What's going on? The front door seems noisy. Henry. Scarlett found our house and has come to visit suddenly. What? We had moved to change our lives after cutting ties with Scarlett. We bought a place convenient for our jobs, never expecting she would find us. Henry and I exchanged looks, wondering what to do. It's okay, Grandma, Grandpa. Let them in. I want to settle things with that person. Mia was now 16. Her developmental disability had stabilized, and she could communicate normally. Though she still had intense fixations and could get absorbed in things, these traits helped her succeed in a certain venture. You're late. If you're inside, just let us in quickly. Scarlett had changed into a completely different person from the one who used to live with our son. As soon as she entered our house, she sat down next to a man on the sofa, crossing her arms and legs in an arrogant manner and glaring at us, clearly in a bad mood. Though her attitude was irksome, reacting to her provocations would only play into her hands. We took a deep breath to maintain our calm, sat across from her, and asked what this was all about. "You have no business bringing strangers into my house. What do you want now, after cutting ties with me 10 years ago?" Mia was sitting at a nearby workbench, busy with some writing. Fortunately, when she's in this focused mode, she doesn't hear anything around her. Knowing she wouldn't be bothered by our argument, we were told to have our discussion here. Glancing sideways at Mia, Scarlett smirked and arrogantly declared, "It's simple. I've come to take Mia back. She's my daughter, so it's my right to have her back, isn't it?" What is this woman talking about? Has she forgotten what she said that day, 10 years ago? Lost for words at Scarlett's absurd thinking, a stern-looking Henry addressed her in a low voice. "You said you didn't want Mia and discarded her. We told Mia her mother was dead, and that should have been the end of it. That was just a verbal agreement. Besides, Mia knows I'm alive through the letters I sent her, right? If her mother is alive, there's no reason for us to live apart." Scarlett's defiant reply was infuriating. She had bombarded our home with letters once she learned of Mia's talent and even showed up at her school to make her presence known. "Do you have any idea how much pain your selfish actions have caused Mia?" Scarlett's actions had recklessly stirred up Mia's emotions. Believing her mother was dead, Mia was so disturbed by this revelation that she couldn't even go to school for a while. However, thanks to her friends and a certain child, she gradually recovered and was able to return to her normal life. "I'm telling you, I'll take proper care of her from now on. So hand over Mia to me. Enough already." Scarlett, eager to justify herself and demand Mia's return, was interrupted by Mia herself. Mia threw a pen at near Scarlett's face, and she stepped up to Scarlett, shaking her fist in anger. "You never cared about me. You dumped me with Grandma and others because I was in the way of your time with that man. And now you claim to be a mother? Don't make me laugh. To me, you're not a mother at all." We could never have imagined she would speak like this when she was little. She used to accept everything her mother did with a smile, never showing anger. But living with us, Mia had changed. She developed a rich emotional life, and thanks to therapy, her teachers, and friends, she learned to express herself. She even learned to distinguish right from wrong. In defiance of her mother, who had abandoned her, Mia honed a particular talent. So, she must not forgive Scarlett, who had chose the man getting along well over her. Scarlett didn't know how much I understood about Mia. She also didn't realize that she was being betrayed by a certain child. "You're just greedy for money. I knew you'd show up sooner or later. After all, you know I'm the author of that movie." At those words, Scarlett's face showed a flicker of unease. After we took her in, we had Mia try various things. Scarlett had made Mia play the piano like Emma, but it wasn't for Mia. That was the real reason she considered abandoning Mia. We had heard about this from a certain child and encouraged Mia to explore her interests and take her to places she wanted to visit. As a result, Mia discovered a talent for something special. It was drawing. She had an exceptional artistic sense. Her imagination was beyond our expectations. As Henry and I, both of whom work in animation, recognize her excellent work. I tried showing it to a certain author. We even showed her work to a famous industry figure, who has an award named after him. His high praise led to her drawings being immediately adopted by my company's editorial department. She demonstrates stellar performance in drawing, which was made into an animated TV series and films in a flash. "Now, I'm worth more than Emma. You thought you could use me to pay off the money you spent on that man and your ballooning gambling debts, didn't you? Too bad. I know all about your wrongdoings. Who would want to go back to a terrible parent like you now? Get out. My real parents are Grandpa, Grandma, and Dad." Scarlett was shaken by these unexpected words from Mia. Why did she know everything? We hadn't even talked about it, so how did she find out? In the midst of confusion and agitation, the man next to her was showing anger at being yelled at. "What are you saying to mother who gave birth to you? Did I ask to be born? You gave birth to me, abandoned me, and now you come back for your own convenience. I don't want to hear mother from someone who's only interested in money. Who would go back to a greedy woman like you? Get out now. Just the thought of you makes me sick. Scarlett was speechless from the shock and surprise of being defied. The man next to her stood up in anger, about to grab her. Just as we stood up to stop him, a voice came from the living room entrance. If you do that, I'll show this video to the police and have you thrown in jail right now. Everyone turned to see Emma at the entrance, holding her mobile phone camera. She was supposed to be in Italy. Why is Emma here? Isn't she in Italy? I asked my teacher to reschedule my lessons. I thought you'd try to get in touch with Mia while I was away and bring her back to our house. I'm glad I kept in touch with her beforehand. As I thought, you came to Grandma and Grandpa's place. Emma said this and walked next to Mia, filming the man to protect him. Emma had explained everything to Mia and had always been there to protect her. She continued to use the man next to Scarlett. With his knowledge of the music industry, she might be able to meet the foreign pianist she admired. She wouldn't spare money to fulfill her dream. And she had a plan to leave Scarlett when the time came. This is my investment to fulfill my dream. It's not hard at all. They're so stupid. They don't know I'm secretly having Grandma manage the money. The reward money I give them is just a fraction, so don't worry. Emma, now a middle school student, began studying about money and law. She had grown up to be as knowledgeable as an adult, talking about her family situation at work and getting full support from the office. Thanks to that, Emma's bank account had enough savings to live on her own. She was finally ready for settling in Italy, which has been her long-cherished dream leaving Scarlett, so she talked to Mia about it in advance. I've been adopted by Grandma and Grandpa too. What? Scarlett was visibly confused by this unexpected turn of events. The man next to her hadn't anticipated this either. In a panic, he pressed Scarlett about what to do. After all the good times I've given you, you should be satisfied by now. I don't need trash like you around me as I become big. Emma and I have never considered you our mother, so rest assured. Don't ever show yourself to us again. We've already talked to Grandma and Grandpa about the adoption. All that's left is your consent, but we're prepared for a refusal and have already contacted a lawyer. I'm so happy to think I'll finally be able to live with Emma again. Well, I live in Italy, so we won't see each other often, but considering everything we've been through, it's easy, right? Now we can enjoy many things together again. Seeing them happy, I couldn't help but smile, and an infuriated Scarlett reached for my collar. You're the one! You filled Emma's head with nonsense. But Emma quickly turned her camera to Scarlett to protect her. Don't get the wrong idea. I made this proposal to Grandma and Grandpa on my own. You thought I was your ally, so you never suspected me. I always comforted you, didn't I? But I've never once thought of you as my mother. My parents are my deceased father, and Grandma and Grandpa, who still love us. Scarlett, who had never been defied by them before, looked like it was the end of the world. She sat down on the sofa in a daze, unable to accept reality. Mia has always longed for you. With Scarlett in such a pathetic state, I delivered the final blow. You rejected the love she repeatedly sought from her mother. You, drowned in men, have no right to call yourself a mother. I will take good care of Mia and Emma with Henry. Don't ever come near these kids again. You are no longer their family. Hearing this, Scarlett broke down in tears. She kept calling for Mia and Emma, but her pleas never reached them. As they asked to be kicked out, Henry turned Scarlett and the man away. If you persist, I'll call the police. At this threat, they left the house scared. Since then, Scarlett and the man visited several times, begging to have them returned. But their persistence disgusted Mia, and she reported them to the police. Under the anti-stalking law, they were forbidden to approach Mia, ensuring her safety. Thus, they successfully severed ties with Scarlett. Their lingering feelings cleared, Mia and Emma lived freely. Emma became a world-famous pianist, met her destiny in Italy, and now performs concerts worldwide with her violinist lover. As for Mia, her movie adaptation was a global hit, making her a popular creator. We've been involved in her works and now support her life as a united family.